Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming you guys. Welcome. Nice to see you guys. Good morning. Welcome to everyone online as well. What I'm going to do today is start with our meditation. Then I'm going to move into this talk on what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is where you're going to dive in and start to understand this natural law in detail. I'm going to describe the 4 types of Kamma and how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. Then we're going to take our mid-morning break, and when we come back, I'm going to teach what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. After our lunch, then we'll come back and have an activity that we're going to end up doing, and I'll talk about the field trip and all that kind of stuff as well. In terms of our meditation this morning, since we've been meditating throughout the course, what I'm going to be doing is just doing the chanting, and then you are on your own for the meditation. No need for guidance or anything like that, because you're going to need to start transitioning towards meditating on your own. And even though I've been providing guidance throughout the course, it's better at this point to just go ahead and let you start to meditate on your own. So that way, if you have questions, you'll have the ability to ask questions. So I'm just going to do the chanting, and then after the chanting, you go ahead and do the meditation where you focus on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. Then when we're done, I'm going to do some chanting on the way out. Okay, so if you guys would like to join, I'll go ahead and get started. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakeva Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anuttero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวะโหตังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาคะวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to everyone. Nice to see everyone. Good morning to everyone online as well. What I'm going to do is move into this talk about what is Kamma, how does it affect me. But first, I'd like to just talk a little bit about meditation and then give you guys a chance to ask questions, because oftentimes students are building up their meditation practice and they have questions specifically about meditation. So we're going to spend some time to do that. What I've been doing over this course is I've been gradually expanding our meditation to build you up to a 30-minute meditation session. And this was our very first meditation where it was 30 minutes. So if this felt like it was a little bit long for you, then you can see what that feels like and kind of stretch a little bit. If it felt like, oh wow, this is pretty straightforward, okay, you can see you can meditate for 30 minutes. But if it was like, wow, this was just right, now you can see. Okay, so this was a 30-minute session to give you guys an idea of what that is like and how to experience that. As you're building up your practice, it's important to understand it can take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to 30 minutes per session for 2 to 3 times per day. But that's the real sweet spot. Once you get to that point, that's where you're going to see significant improvements to the condition of the mind as you're progressing on this path. Doesn't mean you're not benefiting if you're experiencing 5 minutes of meditation or 10 minutes, because there's certainly benefit there. But as you get to that 30-minute mark, that's where the real transformations are starting to occur. And there's transformation happening at other times during your meditation too, but it's just like you'll notice the most significant meditation or improvement to the mind when your meditation gets up to 2 or 3 times per day for 30 minutes or more. So you're not in a race with anybody. You're not in a competition with anybody. It's your independent practice. So wherever you are, even if you're doing 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're just fine. When I first started meditation, I think I could do 1 1 minute. That's about all I could do. My mind was so congested. There was so much pollution in the mind. It was like hitting a brick wall, right? So you got to start wherever you start. What you're going to notice is frequency is more important than duration. So if it's a matter of one meditation for 30 minutes or 2 for 15, you'll notice more benefit in the 2 for 15. So the frequency of that is more important. The same thing is true about generosity. The frequency of your generosity is actually more important than the amount. So you'd like to frequently be meditating. And if you miss a meditation here or there, it's okay, right? If you're meditating 2 times a day, for example, for 30 days in a month, you're meditating about 60 times, right? And then if you add a midday one, you're getting more. Well, if you end up getting 52, 53, 54 in a month, you're making your way to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. If you consistently keep training your mind, you're going to make your way to enlightenment. So your meditation practice is impermanent. It's going to go up and down and up and down, and that's normal. So when you get to the end of your meditation, it's important not to judge it as either good or bad meditation, because every meditation is beneficial. You're going to see that when you get to the end of your meditation, if you're like, whoa, the mind is really busy today, that's really beneficial, right? Because you've got mindfulness in that situation. Sometimes when people get to the end of their meditation, if their mind's really busy, they think it was a bad meditation. This isn't true, right? That's not true. That if your meditation, if you're noticing that your mind is really busy, that means you've cultivated mindfulness and awareness of mind, and you're noticing something about the mind. And now you can use that in a way to help you throughout your day. You might decide, hey, these really big, impactful decisions that I have to make, I'm not going to make those today. I'm going to hold off on those, right? So it's helpful to just be committed to your meditation practice, be consistent with it, and gradually build it up, not being in a race or a competition with anybody. So is there any questions you guys have about your meditation practice? Anything you need help with at this point? For those of you guys online, remember you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions online anywhere. Okay, so that leaves us with, I'm moving into this talk about what is Kamma and how does it affect me. I'm going to help you to understand this topic, because when we're talking about awakening to enlightenment and getting to the enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, where you no longer experience any of those discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others, that's because your mind has awakened, or you've cultivated wisdom about the natural laws. The main natural law that you're cultivating wisdom about is the natural law of Kamma. This is oftentimes referred to as karma by some people. That's the Sanskrit language, where the word Kamma is the Pali language. And the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so I use this word Kamma. If this translated to just one English word, I would use that, but unfortunately it doesn't, so I still need to use this Pali word of Kamma. Oftentimes people think that in their life, whatever they're experiencing, it's good luck or bad luck, or it's destiny or fate, or maybe there's some being like God or some entity like the universe that is controlling what you experience, or some people blame what they experience on other people. None of this stuff is actually true. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. And you can see this to be true and independently verify it by asking yourself the question, who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothes that you're wearing? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning? Who chose what you had for breakfast? Who chose where you live? Who chose what job you have? Who chose the friends that you associate with? These are all choices that you're making, and you're experiencing the results of that. But oftentimes people relegate themselves to thinking that what they're experiencing is good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or a being like God or the universe, some entity called the universe is controlling you, or that it's other people. If you relegate yourself to this type of thinking, you can't change your life. There's nothing you can do, because you can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate. You can't change God or some entity called the universe, and you can't change other people. So what the Buddha brings your attention to is that it's your decisions that lead to any specific result that you experience. And that's where the natural law of Kamma comes in. I'm going to teach you 4 types of Kamma, and then I'm going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma, because that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is getting to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. So if there's anything about your life that you don't particularly care for, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or God or some entity called the universe, or if it's other people that are controlling what we experience, then you're locked in. You can't change anything about your life. And that's really defeating and diminishing way to really go through life, that you can actually change and improve any particular aspect about your life. And where things usually come that people start thinking this way is it's because of the mind's ego. Of course, it's the mind's lack of wisdom of the natural law, but it's the mind's ego thinking that what I'm doing is so great and the problem is everybody else, right? I'm the victim here. Well, you need to be able to see that what you're experiencing is the results of your decisions, and you can improve that. So I'm going to help you first understand what is Kamma. It's a natural law that is functioning at all times in every moment. And whether you're aware of this natural law or not, it's affecting you. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is based in the natural law of Kamma. What natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's essentially a sequence of events. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a dark cloud following you around. Sometimes I hear people talk about it's a bank account that you can make deposits into, and then you can make withdrawals out of it. If you put a lot of money or a lot of wholesome Kamma into the world, you can start now doing unwholesome things in the world, and you'll be just fine. This isn't actually true. It's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the result of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Kamma is. And every single being is affected by this, whether you're aware of it or not. And if you're experiencing struggles and difficulties in your day-to-day life, it's because the mind isn't aware of this natural law, and it doesn't have the wisdom of this natural law. There's certain aspects of how the world is functioning and what's happening in the world that the mind struggles and has difficulties with because it lacks wisdom. And it's trying to make decisions, and those decisions aren't turning out very well for you. But if you understand the natural law and your mind's fully awake to this natural law, meaning you fully cultivated wisdom about it, life is so easy. Life is so straightforward. You can be completely at ease because you fully understand this natural law, and now you can navigate the world with this wisdom. So awakening to this natural law is so important. There's no being or entity that's overseeing the functioning of the natural law of Kamma. Again, it's just a sequence of events. It's cause and effect. It just happens as a result of our intention, speech, and actions, the choices that we make. So that's what the Eightfold Path was about on Tuesday, is helping you to understand the wise decisions that lead to wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma. So the natural law of Kamma is not a system of punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. Sometimes people think this way, depending on what you've been taught in other places about other things. You might come to this natural law thinking it's about punishments and rewards, or who's to blame or who's at fault. And this just isn't true. And again, it's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a dark cloud following you around. It's just the results of your decisions. Okay? So now, just a little summary here is that it's cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, your decisions, and it's your results. Everything you experience is a result of your decisions. If it was any other way, you can't change anything about your life. Okay, here's two important teachings from the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma. Now, everything I've shared earlier about how everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to the natural law of Kamma. So this book series, there's one book that's dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. So out of 13 books, there's one book dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. But you could really say the entire book series is the natural law of Kamma, because everything the Buddha is teaching you is about the natural law of Kamma. So these are just two important teachings that you need to understand at this point as you're starting to approach and understand the natural law of Kamma. Here the Buddha says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What the Buddha is saying is you're the only one that can create Kamma for yourself. Sometimes you might hear people say, oh, give me some of that good Kamma, or don't rub your bad Kamma off on me. This isn't possible. You can't create Kamma for other people. It's just not possible. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. So that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see here, that it's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. Then he says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. Right now, I know that some of you guys have not independently verified the cycle of rebirth yet, but this is something you can independently verify. There's no belief here. In volume 11, chapter 105, I have 17 different criteria of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because it's not something you normally approach at the beginning of your journey to enlightenment. So you can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. And what the Buddha is teaching you here is that when you make decisions, because it's only you that is producing Kamma for yourself, whatever Kamma you produce, you are going to experience that result. You can't run and hide from your Kamma. It's not possible. You're going to experience the results in this life, in the next life, or some future life beyond that, if somebody continues to be reborn. But if you extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, there's no more unwholesome Kamma to experience, and that's why now your mind is experiencing enlightenment, and you won't experience rebirth. So you're extinguishing your unwholesome Kamma. So once you understand that you are producing your own Kamma, and you can't run and hide from it, the very next question is, well, if that's the case, let me learn as much about this natural law as I can, right? So now I'm going to teach you the 4 types of Kamma that you need, and then I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So there's 4 types of Kamma. There's wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. Then there's old Kamma and new Kamma. What wholesome Kamma is any decisions you're making that are harmless. When you're making harmless decisions, you will experience wholesome Kamma, or wholesome results. When you're making harmful decisions, causing harm, then you will experience unwholesome Kamma. What it means to cause harm is to cause harm to someone's material possessions, to their physical body, or their reputation. When you start causing harm to other beings, these beings are going to be interested in causing harm back to you, because that's the way the unenlightened mind works, right? That it wants to cause harm to anybody who causes harm to you. So, for example, right now, you're just sitting here listening to someone talk. You're making a harmless decision. You're not causing harm to anybody, and that's why no harm is coming to you, right? Conversely, if you were making a harmful decision where you were poking in the person next to you in the eyes, harm's going to come to you because you're causing harm. That person's probably going to slap your hand away. Who knows what might happen, right? That there's going to be some unwholesome Kamma that's going to come to you because of that. So if you're making harmless decisions, then you're going to be experiencing wholesome Kamma. And then when you're making harmful decisions, you're going to be experiencing unwholesome Kamma. And that's why the Buddha is teaching you in the Eightfold Path to practice harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. And then he teaches you right speech, right action, right livelihood about how to ensure you're not causing harm to others. Right? So this is what you would like to do, is more and more be making harmless decisions. But you won't know how to make harmless decisions if you haven't studied the Eightfold Path closely, committed it to memory, and practiced it. And if you have those pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, you're going to notice that it's very challenging to be able to produce 100% wholesome Kamma. But we'll get to that here in a moment. Then there's old Kamma and new Kamma. Old Kamma is any decisions that you made in the past, where you're experiencing the results of those now in the present moment. New Kamma is any decisions you're making now that you're going to experience in the future. So for example, let's just say in the past, I made a decision to maybe 3 years ago, I lied on my tax forms. I'm supposed to report my income to the government, then they're going to tax me according to my income. And 3 years ago, I lied on this in order to be able to keep money more than what I was supposed to have. Well, now 3 years later, I get a notice in the mail from the government saying, hey, we found an error on your tax form, and there was $1,000 that you owe us. So you owe us that money. You owe us $1,000 interest, and you owe us $1,000 penalty. You owe us $3,000. This is my old unwholesome karma, because I made a decision in the past 3 years ago to lie on this tax form because I was craving and clinging to money. And now 3 years later, I experienced this unwholesome karma of this letter coming back to me. But now in the present moment, I have decisions to make. And whatever decisions I make in the present moment is going to create new karma for the future, right? So in this example, if I didn't know these teachings and that my goal was to extinguish my unwholesome karma and that I can't run and hide from my karma, when I get this letter that is old unwholesome karma, I might rip it up and throw it away. Or I might call up the government and start yelling and hollering and screaming at them and telling them how wrong they are. Or I might write them a nasty letter. Right? This is what the unenlightened mind does with its lack of wisdom of the natural law of Kamma. It might try to run and hide from this, or it might try to fear other people into doing things my way, right? So that would be now in the present moment. Now that I've got this old unwholesome karma coming back to me, I would now be experiencing new unwholesome karma. I've already got this old unwholesome karma coming back to me. Now I'm creating new unwholesome karma that I'm going to have to deal with in the future. But if you know these teachings and you understand you can't run and hide from this, and the last thing you're interested in doing is calling up the government and being bitter and harsh and hostile, writing them a nasty letter, in the present moment, you know that, hey, I need to extinguish this. So you're going to take responsibility for this. You know, like, oh my goodness, I lied 3 years ago. I shouldn't have been doing that. Now, let me call up the government. Let me write them a letter. Let me be polite, kind, friendly, respectful, and talk to them. And I'm going to use right intention, right speech, and right action as I'm handling this situation. So now when I talk to the government, you might be polite, kind, friendly, respectful, and say, hey, I got this letter. I'm so sorry. I take full responsibility for this error that you found. And I would like to make amends and I would like to pay this, but I'm so sorry. I don't have $3,000. And they say, you know, sir, you're being so polite, so kind. You know what? How about we drop off the penalty and we drop off the interest and you just pay us the original $1,000 and we'll be fine. And I'm like, oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But I don't even have $1,000. I'm so sorry. And they're like, you know what? We can work out a payment plan. How about you just pay us little by little over the next several months, maybe 6 months or a year. We'll work out a payment plan and you can pay us. Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Right? So now with your politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, right intention, right speech, right action, you've now been able to extinguish this unwholesome karma by working out an agreement. And now you're going to follow through on that agreement and make all your payments. And now you've extinguished this old unwholesome karma coming back to you. So these are the 4 types of karma. Wholesome karma is harmless decisions that you're making that are leading to wholesome karma. Then there's unwholesome karma that are harmful decisions, any unwise decisions that you're making that's producing harm to other beings, harming their material possessions, their physical body, their reputation, and so forth. Then there's old karmas, any decisions you make in the past that you're experiencing the results of today. And then any decisions you're making today that you experience in the future, that's new karma. And you would like to extinguish your unwholesome karma. But you're going to find it very challenging because you have these pollutions of mind, and it's going to hinder you from being able to make wise decisions 100% of the time. So that's why you have the Eightfold Path to gradually bring down your pollutions in the mind, so more and more you can make wise decisions. Because here's some more words from the Buddha on what is producing the unwholesome karma. This is connected to something I was teaching yesterday. What's producing the unwholesome karma is craving, anger, and ignorance. Whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome karma. Craving is that longing, yearning, those selfish desires. So in that example that I gave, the craving and clinging was the money. The mind was craving the money and holding on to the money, right? And it produced this unwise decision, which was to lie on the tax form, right? And then the anger is the hostility, the bitterness, the harshness. So if I would have called up the government and been bitter and harsh and hostile with them, that's going to produce more unwholesome karma. And where all that is coming from is the unknowing of true reality, the ignorance, the lack of wisdom of the natural law. And that's going to produce unwholesome karma, right? So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome karma, unwholesome results. That's what that means. Unwholesome results for you. But then if you're interested in improving this, you're going to need to practice the wholesome roots, of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Whenever you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma. So generosity is just the opposite of craving. Craving is the selfishness and holding on to things, not being willing to share with others. Generosity, hey, I'm going to share with you. Right? I'm giving and sharing with others my time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. And that's going to produce wholesome Kamma. Then when you're practicing loving kindness, this is the exact opposite of anger, hatred, and ill will. Right? Anger and hatred and ill will is the bitterness, harshness, and hostility. The loving kindness is the genuine interest in seeing others be well. Whenever you're practicing that and making decisions through that, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma. Then when you're making decisions through wisdom, which is your understanding of the path to enlightenment, the natural law of Kamma, and all these other teachings, now your decisions are based in wisdom, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma for you. So gradually, slowly but surely, you like to bring down your craving, anger, and ignorance through the entire Eightfold Path, training your mind with meditation, but also all those other factors as well. And then you're gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And this is what's going to lead to more and more production of wholesome Kamma. Okay, so I'm going to pause here before we talk about extinguishing unwholesome Kamma and see if there's any questions for you guys. If you guys could use the mics, and then for anyone online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions. All right, so now let's move into how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, because whatever decisions you made in the past, you're going to have to experience those results. If you could snap your fingers today, which you can't do this, but if you could snap your fingers today and instantly start practicing the teachings of the Buddha perfectly, you're still going to experience unwholesome Kamma, because you've made decisions in the past that were unwise, and now you're going to experience the results of those. But when those are coming back to you, you need to extinguish it through practicing the Eightfold Path. Like that example I gave you, when the notice from the government comes back, instead of being bitter, harsh, and hostile or ripping it up and throwing away, now we understand, right view, I need to accept responsibility for this, right intention, harmlessness, then right speech and right action, right? You need to practice the Eightfold Path. By producing more and more wholesome Kamma, that's what's going to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma. So essentially what you're doing is, let's just say in the past, we have this garden hose and we've been shoving all this mud into the garden hose. And now what you're choosing to do is you're choosing to take your garden hose and hook it up to the faucet. Well, if you open up the faucet and you have a little drip coming through the garden hose, you're not going to clean that mud out in this lifetime, right? Maybe you're coming to the temple once every 6 months. Maybe you're meditating once a week. You're not going to get to the extinguishing of your unwholesome Kamma. But if you open up that faucet nice and wide, you're coming to the temple regularly, or you're attending classes, you're reading books, you're watching videos and listening to podcasts, you're consulting with a teacher to get help, you're meditating regularly, things like this, you've got a lot of clean water. A lot of wise decisions are going into your life. Well, now you can use that wisdom to make wise decisions in your day-to-day life too, with your family and your friends and your coworkers and people like this. So now you're going to get some mud coming out of that garden hose. You're going to get some unwholesome results because you've made unwise decisions in the past. So there's going to be some mud that comes out of this garden hose. But then there's going to be some clean water, because you've been putting clean water into this garden hose. But then there's going to be some more mud, more mud, more mud. And then there's going to be clean water, clean water. Then there's going to be mud, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, right? So eventually you're going to flush out all this mud out of your garden hose. So that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and you're doing that for a consistent long-term period, multiple years, right? It took the Buddha 6 years to get to enlightenment. So you practice that for a consistent period of time for multiple years. And as all these things are coming back to you, you're now extinguishing it through the Eightfold Path by practicing that closely. And of course, a good part of that is training your own mind, because you're going to need things like breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation. When your anger is coming up, you need to cut that off and let that go. That's part of you extinguishing your unwholesome kamma. So the way that you produce and eliminate, or the way you eliminate your unwholesome kamma, is you produce wholesome kamma. And it's making decisions through the Eightfold Path that is going to produce exclusively wholesome kamma. Okay, so any questions on this? I'm going to give you some examples here. Okay, let me give you some examples. So in my life, in the past, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very bitter and harsh and hostile environment, right? So when I was growing up, this is what I learned, right? I remember being a kid at McDonald's one time, and we ordered some food, and the young lady forgot to give us French fries. Right? I remember my mom yelling and hollering and screaming at this person, trying to get her French fries. Right? So I grew up watching this and seeing this. So to a certain degree, I was also bitter and harsh and hostile for a period of time during my life. And as I was growing up, of course, I was learning and I was growing. I was trying to become a better person, but there was some bitterness and harshness and hostility in my mind. So when I got together with my wife, who we're together now for 18 years, that when we first got together, of course, I was nice and friendly. There was the honeymoon period, right, where we're all in our best behavior. But then over time, there were times where I was grumpy and I was irritable and I wasn't so kind to her. But then after 11 years of this, I decided, you know what, I'm interested in change. I'm not interested in doing this anymore. I would like to change the way that I'm interacting in the world. And I was already implementing change along the way, but now there was this significant change that I needed to make. So I started practicing these teachings very closely, being loving and kind and warm and gentle in all situations, even though I wasn't that way in the past. Well, my wife was still bitter. She was still hostile because I'd been that way with her. So I would come home sometimes and she would just start yelling at me and she would just be upset with me. Where in the past, not knowing these teachings, I would just yell and holler and scream right back, right? But that didn't produce any kind of extinguishing of unwholesome kamma. That produced new unwholesome kamma, right? So now, understanding these teachings, when she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile with me, instead, I would just walk away. Let her see that, hey, I'm not angry anymore. You're the one who's angry. I'm just going to walk away, right? So I did that for a good long period. Then over time, as her mind was calming down more and more, she would still be bitter, harsh, and hostile with me. And sometimes I would just sit there and I would listen to her because I knew this was my unwholesome kamma, that I had done these same kinds of things to her in the past. And I would just sit there and listen to her, yell and holler and tell me how horrible of a husband I was. And I would say, thank you, dear. And I would why her and I'd walk away. And then over time, as I got more control of the mind, she would be yelling and hollering and screaming, telling me how horrible of a husband I was. And I would say, yeah, but what about now? What have I been doing now? Right? Because we maybe had 6 months or 9 months of where I was calm and I was polite and I was peaceful. And I was like, well, what about now? What am I doing now? She's like, you're not doing that anymore. And I was like, okay, thank you, dear. And I would why and I'd walk away. Right? So over time, it took about 1.5 years of her getting all of her anger out that I had to experience this unwholesome kamma. But slowly but surely, her mind was transforming where she was becoming less and less angry because I was only being loving and kind to her. Where in the past, I was being bitter and harsh and hostile, and that was what was coming back to me. So I had to extinguish this unwholesome kamma by experiencing it. Right? And now eventually she extinguished all of her anger because I wasn't giving any more anger out and she extinguished it. So now it's probably been a good 5-6 years. There's been no arguments. There's no harsh words. There's no bitterness among us. We don't argue. We have discussions. Where in the past, she was craving permanence and I was craving permanence. And when something would happen, it was like a fight to death. I'm sure you guys have been in that situation too, where it's like two animals fighting to death, trying to convince each other who's right and who's wrong, right? Where once we understood that that doesn't work, now we sit down and have discussions. And sometimes at the end of the discussion, her idea is the best idea. Let's go forward with that. Sometimes we sit down in discussions. My idea is the best idea. Let's go forward with that. Sometimes we sit down in a discussion and it's a blending of our two ideas and let's go forward with that. Sometimes in our discussions, we get to the end of the discussion. She hasn't changed her mind. I haven't changed my mind. She goes off and does her thing the way that she thinks is best. and I go off and do my thing the way that I think is best. And that's okay. This is just impermanence. You're not going to agree on everything because you're two individual, unique beings that you're not going to agree on everything. This is impermanence, right? So before, we were craving permanence. Our ego was in there. I'm right, you're wrong. And I need to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. Where now we understand it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about making the decision that we think is best for us. And now we can sit down and discuss that. And of course, we have different ideas because we're two different people. This is just impermanence. We've had completely different experiences in life. So we're going to have two different ways of approaching things, right? And that's okay. And it's okay to disagree. Disagreement doesn't mean disrespect. It just means that we disagree. We've had different experiences. It doesn't mean you're being disrespectful to disagree. Sometimes people think disagreement equals disrespect, but that's not true, right? So this is the universal truth of impermanence, helping you to be able to see that as a couple or as friends or family, you're never going to agree on everything, and that's okay, right? And you can discuss it rather than argue and fight over who's right and who's wrong and craving for everyone to agree with you. So when you're experiencing this unwholesome karma coming back to you, you're going to need to extinguish it. There's certain relationships you have right now where there's probably bitterness and harshness and hostility in those relationships, and you're not committed to the relationship. And one of the best ways to clean that up is to just walk away and end the relationship. You don't have to tell the person this is what you're doing. Sometimes people think that they need to go to their friends and download all the reasons why I can't be your friend anymore, and now I'm leaving the relationship. All you're doing is listing out your expectations. You're saying, I wanted you to do this and you didn't do it. I wanted you to do this and you didn't do it. I wanted you to do this and this and this and this, and therefore I can't be in the relationship anymore. So you're just talking about your own cravings, desires, attachments. Instead, if there's a relationship that you have that you're interested in ending, you're not committed to it, just slowly walk away, like you're walking off into the horizon. And now let's just say 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, you guys cross paths again. You can have a conversation. Hey, Barbara, how you been? What you up to? I haven't seen you in a while, right? Whereas if you download all these reasons why you can't be friends any longer, when you see Barbara 4 or 5 years from now, oh, there's bitterness. There's bitterness there. Barbara doesn't want to talk to you, right? Because you downloaded all those reasons why you think that she's a bad person, right? So you can just gradually walk away from the relationship. Then there's a second category of relationships, people that you are committed to, that you have difficulties and struggles in those relationships, but you're committed to the relationship and you'd like to improve it. This was like my wife or my mom, right? I was committed to those relationships, but I had to do the work on my mind first. Once you do the work on your mind first, then you can now sort out the relationship. You can sort out how you're interacting with this person. You can be loving and kind and warm and gentle, and now you'll have a much better relationship. Then the third category are brand new people that you've never even met yet. You don't even know who they are. You don't know their names. And you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And you'll only ever experience love and kindness in those relationships. So these are the three categories of relationships. People right now that there's bitterness and harshness and hostility and you're not committed to the relationship and you can just move on and gradually walk away from that relationship. Then there's relationships you're more committed to that you need to improve your mind. Right? Oftentimes we think the goal is to change the other person. That's not true. That's not going to work. You need to change your mind. That's what this path is all about, is training your mind. And now when you train your mind, you can be better in the relationship. Then the third category are brand new people that you've never even met before, that you don't even know their names, but you're only ever going to be loving and kind in those relationships, and that's all that you'll ever experience. So this is how you clean up your unwholesome karma in terms of relationships. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you only have harmonious relationships. You don't have difficulties and struggles in any relationships whatsoever. There's no bitterness and harshness and hostility in any of your relationships whatsoever. But when you have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, you'll find that hard to do, right? There's going to be certain relationships that you struggle in. So if you're gradually training your mind to bring down your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're gradually increasing the generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, and now you're working in this way in terms of cleaning up your relationships, eventually you'll get to a point where all your relationships are harmonious. And you'll know that you're experiencing enlightenment because your mind's completely peaceful, completely joyful. It's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontentedness whatsoever. All your relationships are peaceful and at ease. They're really blossoming. And you'll know that, hey, you're living this ideal life where you can now navigate the world fully understanding this natural law of Kamma. Okay, so any questions on extinguishing your unwholesome Kamma? Okay, now I know your name because you were online. Amit. I saw that in writing.
Yes, thank you. My question is pertaining to teaching, right? Because I also teach music and I teach yoga, and I have sometimes, of course, as you would we would have a lot of experience, I'm assuming, with this, is that you would have people come into class where they've learned things very differently, right? And I used to teach yoga in Los Angeles as well. And their idea of what yoga is completely different from my background, can be many times, which is my learning from India, and with my teachers there. So how would you hold space for people who have maybe sincerely many times have learned in a different way, which may be quite different from your understanding of the subject and what you would like to share? I know, I'm guessing that may have also happened to you in several different circumstances. So what would be your approach in context to the entire teachings of Buddha, including Kamma, with that?
So when you know what you know, and you know it to be 100% true, then nobody can shake you off of that truth, right? Because you've independently verified it and you know that it's true. So for example, I know with 100% certainty that craving, desire, attachment produces all discontentedness. So no matter what somebody ever says to me, I could never be convinced that it's other people who are causing you to be angry, because I've seen the truth, right? And all of these other teachings that I share with you, I know they're 100% true because I've verified every single one of them, or else I wouldn't be sharing it with you. And I wouldn't be able to sit here with such confidence to be able to communicate it. So when you have the truth, whether it's about yoga or music or what have you, in terms of you know that this particular yoga is working, it's important for you to know that. And then that's what you are choosing to share. If somebody else has a different perspective or a different opinion or different view, they're entitled to that. They're free to have that view and that opinion. But if they're coming to you for guidance, then you're going to share what you're sharing. And it's important that you're not trying to convince them that your view is the, wise, but instead, this is just what I offer. This is just what I share. And if they're coming to you with a different perspective, that's normal because of impermanence. They're not going to all have the same perspective as you. In fact, as a teacher, if all your students were coming to you already knowing what it is that you're teaching, then you're useless as a teacher. So as a teacher, you're always going to have students that don't understand what it is that you understand. So you need to understand that they're coming from a different place and they're there to receive whatever it is that you're sharing. And in some cases, they might be coming to learn with you and they're really not interested in learning, right? I've had that here at the temple. People will take all this effort to come to Thailand and come to this temple and they're really not interested in learning, even they're sitting here in a class, right? Because the ego is there, right? So you need to be able to understand that you can't teach everybody everything that you know. You can only help those people that are truly interested in what it is that you have to share. So the whole idea of holding space, you don't have to hold space for anything. This is like a nice little phrase that people use, like I'm going to hold space. No, it's up to each individual to make the choice that they're interested in learning. They are on their own independent journey to cultivate wisdom. You're putting yourself in a position to be able to share that wisdom. And if they're interested in learning it, then you share it. And you're not trying to convince them of anything. You're just helping them to understand what works for you. And whatever they glean from that, whatever they're able to extract from that and benefit their life, wonderful. And if that's not what they're interested in, then that's fine too, right? In terms of the teachings of the Buddha shares that if a student understands even one sentence of his teachings, it's very good for their welfare and peacefulness for a long time. So when students come here, depending on how long they spend with me, they're going to understand more than just one sentence. But there's very rare occasions, maybe once a year, twice a year, where a student might show up here and they think their goal is to teach me. And they will come here and they will try to teach me what they think they know. This is their craving. This is their conceit. And their mind isn't enlightened. It's very clear, but yet they're showing up here thinking that their goal is to teach everybody else. This is the conceit, not just me, but sometimes they try to teach other students. And you just need to understand that that's where that person is, and their conceit is up really high. They're having certain cravings, but your goal in a learning environment is to share what you know, make it available to people, and it's up to them to pull the teachings from you. Your goal isn't to push the teachings on other people, but it's just to make yourself available and then allow people to glean whatever understanding that you have. Because an enlightened being, which you know you're not enlightened yet, but an enlightened being, they're wise, right? Their mind is peaceful. Their mind is joyful. All they need to do is walk down the street with wisdom and a smile. They're not out there trying to convince everybody of something. They're not out there trying to push things into the world. They've already accomplished what they needed to accomplish, which is they've trained their mind to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. And then whether you're a yoga teacher or a music teacher, because an enlightened being can be a yoga teacher and a music teacher too, right? An enlightened being could be an entrepreneur and a business owner and any number of things, right? A politician or anything like this. Well, if you're enlightened and you have the wisdom and you're walking through the world with a smile, all you need to do is execute on your goals and your objectives. And if one of your goals and objectives is to share yoga and to share music, then you put yourself in environments where you can do that. And then people can glean whatever they're going to glean without you having to feel like you need to convince them or push them or force them to do anything. You're just making yourself available. And the amount of learning that each student does is based on their decisions, not based on your decision. Right? Sometimes as a teacher, we take the responsibility. Someone might choose to take the responsibility for the learning for their student, where this isn't true. It's the student's responsibility to learn, and they're only going to be able to glean whatever understanding that they choose to glean. And you can just make yourself available to them to be able to have that opportunity to learn. Mm-hmm.
So a follow-up with that would be, for me, when I was a student earlier on, I still am, of course, but early when I was a student, there may have been some aversion within me and resistance to teachings from the teacher, mm-hmm. right? And a bit of a reaction or a pushback with that. So naturally, when I'm teaching, that's going to come back to me.
Mm-hmm. That's your karma.
Right? Yeah, naturally, I recognize that. I mm-hmm. understand that, right?
Yeah.
So in that situation, you just let it pass through you? What do you do?
Yeah, if a student can only be a student, and a student can only learn if they choose to learn. As a teacher, if you're not trying to push things on your students and you're not trying to convince them of anything, you'll be completely fine. Because if a student shows up and you are sharing some things with them, like you're trying to maybe do some yoga assist and try to correct their body, and if they're not wanting you to do that, hey, just stop. Don't try to assist them any longer. Right? They're showing you that they're not interested in your help. They're not interested in your feedback. So don't help those 2 or 3 people that are not interested. Help these 20 people that are interested, because not everyone's going to be interested in what you have to share. So you focus on the people that are interested in what you have. And now you don't push it on those people. You don't try to force them or convince them anything. These people are readily receiving what it is that you're sharing. And it's no longer a struggle, because these people over here that aren't really interested in what you have to share, if you keep trying to push it on them and keep trying to convince them, you are operating through your craving. So now you're going to be frustrated when they don't learn what you're trying to teach them. So just stop teaching them. Come over here and teach these people. Even the Buddha, that people asked him during his life, they said, what do you do when a student doesn't respond to your advice? And he says, I kill them. And you know what it means? They said, hold on a second. Like, what do you mean? You can't kill people. He said, killing somebody is choosing to no longer teach them. He said, in my teachings, that's like killing someone, right? So he chose not to teach people. You would think that a Buddha would teach everybody and anybody, and he would go out there and beat a drum and tell everybody how right his teachings are. No, that's conceit. That would be craving. He just made himself available for those people who were interested to learn with them. And if somebody wasn't interested to learn and they weren't heeding it as advice, and they weren't making progress on the path, they weren't really dedicated to learning and growing, then he just stopped teaching them, right? And he taught these 1,000 people that were actually interested. These 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 people that weren't interested, he just didn't teach them, right? He just taught these people over here. And that's the same thing you can do with your yoga and your music. I think it's on.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So in some ways, because you don't want to, if you're operating on the natural law of Kamma, then in order to not, if you were to like force your teaching on somebody, it comes from a craving, right?
Yes.
So then you would be creating unwholesome karma again.
You would be producing it,
You'd
yes.
be producing it again for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you were to operate out of loving kindness and let them be, not teach them,
yep,
then you would stop that cycle, right? You'd create a
exactly. Exactly.
Right?
You have generosity in your mind,
right,
meaning you're willing to share with them.
Right.
And you have loving kindness where you have care and concern. You have this genuine interest in seeing them be well, but you also have wisdom, which you understand that it's unwise to push things on people and try to convince them to do things. Students need to pull wisdom from the teacher. Right? That's very important. And then now you can be at ease because it's not your responsibility to push these teachings on people and force them to learn it, because that is going to produce discontentedness for you and unwholesome results because your students aren't going to like it. Instead, you make the student responsible for their own learning and their own growth. And now if they show up and they ask questions and they're interested to learn, teach them and teach them and teach them. Help them to learn. And then if they're not interested and they don't ask questions, or they just don't show any regard towards what it is that you're teaching them, then just don't teach them, right? Because some students are going to have ego. Some students are going to have craving. The vast majority of people do in the world, right? There's not very many enlightened beings in the world. So you're going to see extensive amounts of craving and ego and arrogance and people pushing you away. And when you see these kinds of things, you just choose, okay, that's where that person is in their life. I'm going to help these 20 people over here. Right? And now you just go help them. And if this person decides to change at any point and chooses to start asking for your guidance, then you help them. You just stay open to guiding this person. You don't turn your back on them. You just know that, okay, they're not in a place to learn right now, and that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So now one more thing before we finish up this topic of Kamma. This is the laws of society. Sometimes when I teach the natural law of Kamma, how you can't run and hide from your Kamma, someone might say, hey, David, what about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene? Their car was full of blood. The murder weapon was under their bed. They went to court and they were found not guilty. Didn't they run and hide from their Kamma? The answer is no. They have not run and hid from their Kamma, because what they just experienced is they experienced the laws of society, human laws. Human laws are imperfect because human beings are involved and we're prone to error. So the court of law is not 100% of your Kamma. There's other things that are happening that are your Kamma that you may not be there to see, but that individual is experiencing the results of their Kamma. You just might not be there to see it. And if you're only looking at the court of law, you're only looking at the human law. And that's not perfect. The natural law of Kamma is perfect. You're going to experience the results of this. So using that example of the person whose bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, and their car was full of blood, they still experience their Kamma. And these are the kinds of things that they're going to experience. They're going to experience a bad reputation in the community, right? Because when this is all over the news and all the evidence is being talked about, people are going to know, right? People are going to know what's happening. They're going to make their decisions. Then this person can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, short lifespan. The way that these things happen is that if you have enough craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind to kill another human being, there's a lot of stress and anxiety in your mind. There's a lot of discontentedness. There's a lot of potentially guilt and shame and fear and things like this. And this puts stress on the physical organs of the body. And you can notice that there's this shortened lifespan. There's this sickness and disease that's occurring in the body. When you're putting out that amount of bitterness and harshness and hostility, you're going to experience that coming back to you. Right? It's not like your entire life is going wonderfully and you just killed this one person. Right? That craving, anger, and ignorance that led to you killing that person, you're doing that in all these other relationships too. And now people are being bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive and fighting you and maybe even being interested to kill you. You're going to experience a loss of income and wealth, right? Because now my bad reputation is all over the community because this person has killed. Now people aren't interested in hiring you. You're going to have to go to court and defend yourself on a murder charge. That's very expensive, right? You're going to lose a certain amount of income and wealth. And again, you're going to have difficulties in relationships. It's not like all your other relationships are going perfectly and you've just killed this one person. You're having difficulties in all these relationships, right? You're going to have challenges securing and progressing in employment because now that the news is out that this person is killed and they've been found not guilty, who's going to hire this person? If you were an employer and you knew that this person was a murderer, are you going to hire them in your company? Probably not, right? And then also difficulties in securing housing. Are you interested in being roommates with somebody who was potentially a murderer but just happened to be found not guilty in the court of law? You're probably not going to invite that person into your home to be your roommate, right? So they're going to have difficulties securing housing and acquiring basic necessities to sustain life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. These things are going to be very hard for this person to acquire. And then ultimately, discontentedness itself in rebirth. Discontentedness is the shame, the guilt, the fear. All of that is still going to be there, right? The stress, the anxiety, all that's still going to be there. So they're going to be experiencing that unless they choose to make a difference in their life and start training their mind. And then ultimately, if they die in that condition, then there's rebirth into whichever realm they might be reborn into, right? So these are the consequences of decisions. That's what the Kamma is. It's the consequences of your decisions, and you can't run and hide from that. So even though someone's found not guilty, they're still experiencing the results of that. You can also have the other side of this too. You can have an individual who goes to court that actually did not do this thing, and they're found guilty, right? Because the court of law is not perfect. It's wonderful that we have laws, and we should always aspire for them to be more equitably and fairly, enforced. But the thing is that human beings are involved, so it's impossible for them to always be executed fairly. So let's just say somebody was in a gang all through their life, and at the age of 25, they got out of this gang. And while they were in the gang, they were selling drugs, they were maybe murdering people, they were doing all these other things. They never got caught for any of this stuff, but they got out of the gang at 25 and they're starting to make a change in their life. Now let's just say 26, 27, they've been away from the gang for a year or two, but now let's just say the gang goes out and does a murder, and this person wasn't even involved, but somehow the murder gets pinned on them, and now they go to court and they're found guilty of this. Well, all those offenses that they did where they were selling drugs and killing other people and they never got caught, well, now this one that they actually truly didn't do, they got caught for it, or it got pinned on them, and now they go to court and they're found guilty and they go to jail for the rest of their life, right? So you can have these kinds of situations occurring too. So when you're seeing in the news people are being found guilty or not guilty, no need to get upset, no need to get angry about that. Whatever's happening is the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect. And if this person's found not guilty, and they're actually truly guilty, they're still experiencing their Kamma. You don't have to worry about that it's going to happen. And if this person is found guilty and they're truly not guilty, right, then this person very potentially could have done things in the past that now it's all catching up with them, right? So you don't have to be worried and upset about all the things that are happening in the court of law. This is not 100% of the natural law of Kamma. This is Kamma, but it's not 100% of the natural law of Kamma. There's other things as well. So any questions on this? Yes, ma'am.
So maybe what we are experiencing currently could be the Kamma from the past life. Would that be also possible?
Yeah, you can experience your Kamma from a past life, but let me explain to you the way this is happening, because it's not anything mystical or magical. So let's just say in a past, well, first let's talk about the cycle of rebirth. So if you think about two cardboard boxes, cardboard box A is a certain size, certain color, certain shape, certain texture, right? And inside cardboard box A, there's certain contents in that cardboard box. Then you got cardboard box B, different size, different color, different shape, different texture. And when cardboard box A dissolves, those contents that are in the cardboard box, they need to find a new cardboard box, right? So this is like the mind itself. So the mind, at the end of this life, if you haven't purified the mind, you still have cravings. And there's certain residual memories that go into this new cardboard box. So while we call it the cycle of rebirth, a better way to understand it is the cycle of new existence. Because it's a brand new existence every single time. It's a new body and a new mind every time. The word that the Buddha used was samsara, and people have been translating it as the cycle of rebirth. But if you look at the way the Buddha describes samsara, there's nothing being reborn. It's a new body and a new mind every single time. So it's really the cycle of new existence. So this old cardboard box that dissolves, which is the mind, because the mind is not permanent, if there's cravings, those cravings and residual memories are to go into this new cardboard box. Okay, so this is how the cycle of rebirth happens, that it's craving that is the fuel that causes rebirth. If there's craving in the mind at the time of death, it's going to produce a new life, right? If there's no craving, the mind's enlightened, you'll experience the peace and joy, and the same causes and conditions that produce discontentedness produces rebirth. So if there's no craving, then there's no new birth. There's no new existence. Okay, so that's how the cycle of rebirth works. But now let me give you an example so you can see how you experience Kamma from your previous life, because it's nothing mystical or magical. Let's just say that there's person A in the past that has a certain lifestyle. Let's just say this person is craving for extensive amounts of sex, and they're having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of different people, right? And now let's just say they go all the way through the end of their life and they're still having sex with lots of people, broken relationships, hostility, bitterness, sexually transmitted diseases, all these different things are happening for them, and then they die. And they never extinguish their craving for sex. Well, now that craving and residual memories from person A go into person B's mind. And now person B has these cravings and residual memories. And now as they're going through life, they also have lots and lots and lots and lots of sex, broken relationships, divorces, marriages, different things, babies from different fathers perhaps, or different mothers, right? All these different things that are happening, sexually transmitted diseases. And now let's just say at the age of 45, they contract a sexually transmitted disease, maybe HIV, and they die. Okay, well, this is their unwholesome Kamma, and it's from their previous life because the craving is from the previous life, but it's from decisions that they're making in this life. So the cravings, residual memories are from a previous life, but the decisions are from this life, and now it's producing Kamma in this life. And we would refer to that as old unwholesome Kamma. Because this person B, let's just say at the age of 20, if they would have found these teachings, they could have extinguished their craving for sexual contact, and they could have just had one partner, or they could have extinguished their craving 100% and not had sex at all, and now they might have gotten to enlightenment, right? By the age of 25 or 30, right? So now this person would have had a completely different life. But because their craving continued in the mind, and and they had that ignorance or the lack of wisdom. They didn't even understand what that was. They just continued to act upon it, making all these unwise decisions that led to these unwholesome results. So we might say that these unwholesome results are old unwholesome karma. It's unwholesome karma from a previous life. It's really decisions in this life that are leading to that unwholesome karma, but it's just the craving is from the previous life. So that's why we call it past life karma. Make sense? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a break for us. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you guys this next topic of what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. So I'm going to teach you these two topics. So now it's 10:35. Why don't we take, say, a 25-minute break? We'll start off right at 11 o'clock. Okay? So enjoy your break and we'll see you at 11.